From Lusaka, Zambia, this is S24 News.
Good evening, this is S24, your first and only Zambian 24-hour news channel that continues to be at the source of your story. My name is Amina Kaunda, and these are your evening headlines. Malawian president rises up to task. PMRC optimistic about presidential address. Fire breaks out at Beirut port 1 month after explosion. Pharmaceutical Society president refutes suspension rumors. And in sports, Zanaco eyes set on lifting FAS League Cup. And now your news in detail. The Policy Monitoring and Research Center, PMRC, says it expects President Edgar Lungu in his presidential address tomorrow, Friday, as he officially opens the 5th session of the 12th National Assembly to provide an update on the implementation of legislative reforms aimed at addressing emerging issues that hinge on democracy, rule of law, and enhanced financial management. PMRC Executive Director Benedetti Deka Zulu spoke to S24, and Tito Kalama filed this report.
The much-anticipated opening of the 5th session of the 12th National Assembly by President Edgar Lungu on Friday, September 12, 2020 is here. Zambians and business houses are full of expectations, especially in addressing the impact of the coronavirus pandemic.
Coronavirus pandemic, that is, where we are as a country with regards to what measures have been put in place through the Ministry of Health, and how the responses and how different segments of society is responding. In that light, we're talking about the education sector, we're talking about the health sector itself, if we are improving, and on what scale, of course, and we're talking about the numbers of patients who would want to expect that, of course, from the Ministry of Health's updates directly, legislation reforms with regards to procurement systems. He did mention on 2nd of September, so ardently that this system needed to evolve so that this could give some sort of confidence in the general public e-voucher system to see if indeed the farming inputs are going to be delivered to our people on time and across the country, and the sort of equal distribution of these inputs.
It is only hoped that the parliamentary address marks a new chapter of the many spheres of the Zambian society that has been adversely affected by the coronavirus pandemic. Tito Kalama, S24.
The Pharmaceutical Society of Zambia President Jerome Kanyika has refuted allegations that he has been suspended after he charged that government last week authorized the countrywide distribution of expired drugs worth 54 million kwacha. He told S24 that the constitution of the Pharmaceutical Society of Zambia does not have provision for an interim president, but instead allows for elections to be conducted to choose a president.
I have not been suspended. Those who are saying has been suspended, can they say what I've done for them to say I've been suspended? So that's not true. And in our constitution, there is nowhere or provision in the constitution that support or say PSZ president can be suspended. No. So I'm still the PSZ president. But I know there are some factions of people sponsored by some politicians. I know over that. Yeah, I know such movements. No, the story is the fact, the statement of that's the fact, that's the way things are. It's just that I cannot talk more over that, but those things that are coming up, I think I can talk more about them. Even I've seen some people issuing a statement saying interim president. No, they cannot be interim president. We don't have such in our constitution. You get elected through a ballot. That's what it is in our constitution. There's nothing more, nothing less.
In a related development, the Young African Leaders Initiative has expressed concern with the alarming statements issued by Pharmaceutical Association of Zambia President Jerome Kanyika, purporting that government, through the Ministry of Health, is providing substandard and falsified medical products that may harm patients and fail to treat diseases. Governance and legal advisor Isaac Mwanza described the report as a scheme to tarnish the name of the head of state and his administration.
Now, if our cooperating partners are going to stop providing support because there's something wrong with the contracts that have been given to so many people, it means that we are risking getting enough essential drugs support from the cooperating partners. So we think that the responsible professionals in the medical sector must come out strongly and be able to defend their profession, because it is them at the end of the day who are putting themselves at risk and their friends rather than what they are doing. Those who want to malign the government, who are trying to say, no, government is corrupt, they've been awarding these different tenders. There was nothing wrong in the award of the tender to Honeybee Zambia, even if it is not a limited liability company. It is a registered entity. And this registered entity should be allowed to get contracts, but they have their liability at the end of the day when they do not deliver. That is what our position is.
And now a fire has erupted at the port of Beirut, where an explosion had killed more than 200 people last month. The Lebanese army that has taken over the cleanup of the area after the initial blast, in a statement, said that the fire began at a warehouse where oil and tires are kept in the port's duty-free market. No casualties have been reported. In another development, President Lazarus Chakwera of Malawi this afternoon presented himself before the Malawian Parliament. Malawians have expressed mixed reactions to the prospect of the president taking questions from the members of Parliament. While some felt it was a good move, others were of the view that it was a waste of time and resources, as the questions were pre-approved. We are now joined by Winston Mwale, our S24 contributor. We will possibly get him back on later on in the show. We now move on to our next development, which is more on the story which has to do with business news. We have Yoela Chomba coming up.
Voting is the act of choosing someone or something in an election, and in this particular case, a political candidate. In a democratic country like Zambia, voting is essential. What that means is that we all have the power to choose freely who will rule our country and who will not. Given that choice, it is imperative for us to make informed decisions, because what we decide, we have to live with.
Please, no!
The voting process is quite easy to understand, so let's get right into it. After registering as a voter and collecting your voter's card, you will have to wait until the polling day to cast your vote. In this time of waiting, you can take time to get more acquainted with the aspiring candidates so that you're able to make an informed decision come polling day. On polling day, when you get to the polling station, you will undergo screening. This is done to make sure that the people voting are eligible voters. The polling officers will check your NRC and voter's card. They will also do a security check just to ensure that you only have what you need at the voting booth. So before you get to the voting booth, you will be given your ballot papers listing the candidates you can vote for, and you will proceed to the voting booth. Always ensure you read the instructions carefully in order to not make any mistakes. Thereafter, complete your ballot paper by selecting your preferred candidate. Do not for any reason write anything else on your ballot paper, as this may nullify your vote. Your thumbnail will be inked with a semi-permanent dye, just so you cannot be allowed to vote again anywhere else other than the place you voted. Right after the voting is done and the polling station is closed, the ballot papers are all screened to make sure they've been filled in correctly. The ones that are not are set aside as rejected ballots and do not count as votes. This is why it is important to follow all the instructions and fill in your ballot paper carefully. As the ballots are counted, a report is given for each district and province. After all the results are compiled, the returning officer then gives a comprehensive report for the nation, revealing the victor for that election. The victorious runner for that election is then sworn in and named president. Each one of us gets one vote. Let's make it count.
Good evening and welcome to S24's Business News. My name is Yoela Chomba. We are still tackling issues around the upcoming budget presentation in a fortnight. But aside from that, we had the Treasury Bill auction today, and we still have the local currency and its dynamics to talk about. Munyumba Mtwale, managing partner at Nikiwa Capital, is with us again today to look at another angle of the upcoming budget. Good evening, Munyumba.
Good evening.
Right, Munyumba, before we shoot more flares around the upcoming budget, tell us how the Treasury Bill auction went today, and what is your analysis of today's FX market? Was it
well,
as expected?
The basis of any of the auctions right now is you're kind of going in a cycle in, cycle out flow.
Yeah.
So they're not really playing a good monitoring mechanism for the actual state of the economy itself. They're not giving the confidence measure they are, and that's because, like I said, that it's pretty much people working on inventories and people looking at quick place to throw their cash in. Now, looking at the FX market, that's where you're seeing more of the sentiment read coming in. And right now, what you're finding the FX market kind of finding its snuggling point as it's getting ready for the three triggers that I've been talking about, where you're going to see movement in the FX zone itself. And the first trigger, as I said, is tomorrow's speech. It's going to be tomorrow's speech by the president. Then it's going to be the lead up going up to the budget speech and then tax season. Those three hits are pretty much going to be what cleans out the FX market. And a lot of the things are pointing to a downwards direction. The president has got a bit of a mountain to climb tomorrow in setting the tone for the next couple of weeks. And the first thing he's got to try and do is reverse the views, basically, of the last Moody's rating agency statement, where they didn't give out a rating, but they did say that they view the biggest problems of Zambia as the debt fundamentals. They're looking at the vulnerability to global economic conditions, and then they're also looking at and they really hampered on the point of the fiscal deficit. They said, look, we can expect the fiscal deficit in 2020 to already be a problem because of the coronavirus. But going forward, you're going to have to see how you guys are going to rein it in. Now, if he's trying to bring in confidence, that's what the rating agency is pretty much telling you. His speech has to try and reverse all those ill sentiments that are sitting out there in the global economy. Though PMRC did talk about things like today in their statement, did talk about things that they want to see the COVID, like how he's dealing with the COVID bond, how he's trying to get import substitution and people to do more manufacturing, agricultural substitution, those kind of things. It is an issue of confidence. Right now, the president has to set the tone of a confident agenda. Now, I'm already looking at a few points which might, which I've seen in the previous press statement that might start to work against that. So there's a bit of a battle whether to speak confidence and also to speak optimism when it comes to the expenditure side of the budget. Those are different things, but obviously I think we'll capture that later.
Yeah, now, Nyumba, you're speaking confidence and optimism. Now, if you are a rating agency, what would you like to hear from the president's speech tomorrow in order for you to get confidence?
If I'm a ratings agency, I'm going to try and hear a little bit more fiscal prudence as much as possible. Because I think that's been the number one problem. They keep calling it fiscal spillage. That's pretty much what's been happening. What they keep pointing at, saying that. And then the last time I remember that what did hamper the president, I think the last budget, the last time we had a reaction to the budget, the statement that came out was, we are concerned about the ambitious capital projects. So I think they're going to keep a very close eye on projects and project spending and infrastructure spending. That's pretty much what's going to give them a trigger when it comes to confidence.
Right. Now, when we spoke earlier this week, Munyumba, you mentioned that you hope to see a budget that was more growth-driven towards the private enterprise. But what do you think will actually come out from this budget, and what reaction do you expect to see if indeed it will be a spender's budget?
It is going to be whether we want to accept it or not, it is going to be a spender's budget. It is going to be a really, really tough spender's budget because it's an election year, as I said. And I think a couple of days ago, you did have, as I said, the Minister of Finance talking about railway revitalization. And you also had the President recently who said, look, no matter what people say, roads and infrastructure are going to be a priority. So you have those two statements already telling you what kind of budget to expect when it comes to spending and expenditure going forward. So you can already see it. Now, if you do see a spender's budget, which is anything that jumps the way last year's did, I think this is what you're seeing in the currency markets is a reaction to last year's jump in the budget. That move from 80s into the hundreds in terms of the expenditure side of the budget. And we're probably going to see a similar jump. If we're going to say it's also got to do with external debt, and then also got to do with the fact that there are massive expenditure programs that have been targeted as well. So those two things together are probably going to line up and put worries on people's mind that, okay, is the indebtedness of the nation going to continue? So I think that's the main concern that actually is being looked at when it comes to that. Now, I am expecting a strong expenditure budget, but what I would want to see, which would probably help, as I've been pointing out lately, is a growth-driven budget, one that aims mainly at how to actually grow the economy. And I could give you obviously the quick view on how to do that. I mean, that's the easiest way on how to look at it and how to do it. And the first thing, obviously, I'd like to do is just quickly introduce a quick paradox, something I call the bar owner's paradox. I know that I'm speaking Zambia's language, but basically, if you're running a club in any country, you're trying to get as many people through the door and you're trying to get your bar tab running. That's the main concern that people are always trying to do, trying to get as much expenditure. And the biggest problem Zambia is facing is we've got a high entry fee at the door, and then we've also got a high dress code. Consider the dress code the regulatory standards. So you got to drop the dress code so that it fits the people, and then you got to drop in fact, you just got to scrap the actual. You got to scrap the actual fee that people are being charged at the door, so that you can get as many people in there and spending at the bar, because that's exactly what you want. And obviously, at the bar, we call the price of drinks the tax. So you want to try and drop the price. So if you're a bar owner, you know exactly what I'm saying right now. I know you want to pretend you may not know right now. You want to, for the sake of public image, but if you're a bar owner, you really want to make sure that that's how you run your operation. And you got to think about the economy in such a way. You got to drop the entry fee, drop the dress code. You got to let as many people as you can in there, spending, enjoying, and trying to have a good time. Let the economy try and shake out who's in there, who's not in there. Because here's the key thing I always point out: how does a club get its reputation out there? It's packed. It's always the place that's happening. It's always buzzing. It's always happening. And when you've got that kind of reputation as a club, more people would want to come to it, including the tourists when they come into your city. If that's the case, right, and you think about it that way, what is attracting people? Confidence. So if your economy is happening already inside, what happens is it attracts the global economy, and it attracts people to your bond auctions, attracts people to your debt, your coffers, your treasury. All of a sudden, your economy starts working. So you got to rewire the way we're thinking about this. That's a quick analogy I'm looking at.
Munyamba, an interesting paradox, the bar owners paradox. I'm sure we'll talk about that more in the upcoming discussions as we lead up to the budget. But thank you for coming through this evening, Munyamba. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Right, now in more business news, the Zambia Revenue Authority, ZRA, says it will be tough on non-tax compliant businesses by taking them to court for prosecution. ZRA Corporate Communications Manager Topsisi Kalinda further revealed that court convictions for tax-related crimes have continued to yield positive results, as was the case last week where the authority secured another successful conviction of a male Auport Piri, a clearing agent for authoring forgery and smuggling.
Basically, I think that for us, this is the way we'll take things. I think people need to know that it is a serious offense to evade tax and to avoid paying what is due to the state. Therefore, we want to appeal to all business houses to ensure that they issue receipts, they issue tax invoices, because these checks are going to continue, and we actually dedicate more staff towards that operation at the moment, because we've noted that the compliance levels have gone down. During the random incognito checks, we checked a number of them. So yesterday we now started dwelling down on those that were found we are wanting, And probably because of the nature of their business, the size of the business, we needed to understand them more. And Azan was one of them that we conducted yesterday. The searches continue today, and our men are already out there in the field, and we will keep the state updated on how these operations are going. And we'll actually be now giving statistics on how many. This is why we compiled the statistic from January to date. So I think going forward, maybe on a monthly basis, we will be actually compiling these statistics. Maybe they will help us deter some people from doing what is wrong.
In more business, the Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, CCPC, today issued a statement stating that they received a notice from the COMESA Competition Commission warning the public against consuming liquid fruit red grape products from South Africa, as they allegedly contain small shards of glass. But the company has posted on its website that the drink does not contain any glass, explaining that the substance has been verified to be potassium bitartrate crystals.
The Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, CCPC, says it has received a notice from the COMESA Competition Commission saying a batch of a drink produced by Pioneer Foods in South Africa, liquid fruit red grape, had been recalled from the market because it contained some glass shards.
The Competition and Consumer Protection Commission has received a cautionary notice from the COMESA Competition Commission warning the general public against consuming liquid fruit red grape products from South Africa that are alleged to contain small shards of glass. This warning comes after Pioneer Foods, the manufacturers of liquid fruit red grape products, ordered the recalling of the affected batch of 330 ml cans of liquid fruit red grape products from the market. In its ongoing investigations, Pioneer Foods identified a single batch of liquid fruit grape products with specified brands and codes. In view of the foregoing, the Commission would like to urge consumers to exercise caution by ensuring that they look out for the affected liquid fruit red grape products and avoid consumption for the good of their health and safety. Further, the Commission hereby directs all importers, distributors, traders, wholesalers and retailers to remove and surrender to the nearest public health office of every council or affected liquid fruit red grape products with immediate effect.
But Pioneer Foods, the company in question, posted on its website that the particles in the drink are not glass as they had posted earlier, but that the substance had been verified to be potassium bitartrate crystals. They had defined potassium bitartrate crystals as a natural occurring substance in products made from grapes, such as grape juice and wine, and has maintained that consumers should not consume or dispose of the product, but to return it for full refunds. For S24 Business, this is Esnat Lungu.
That is all we had for you in today's business news. Amina will be back with more news after the break.
If he has the right, Doc, to talk about the party that way, then I'm beginning to wonder.
He doesn't have. Yeah, but many people talk. KBF talks about party business and tells them.
We're talking about your party.
No.
There's a cartel somewhere that has just plotted against the head of state and the PF government. And the whole idea is, look, let's just be calling them corrupt. They'll just be calling you corrupt.
On national TV, have to allow
on national TV, I was quiet when you were speaking. Let me speak.
Please. Welcome back. Following a previously reported story, President Lazarus Chakwera of Malawi this afternoon presented himself before the Malawian Parliament. Malawians have expressed mixed reactions to the prospect of the president taking questions from members of Parliament. While some felt it was a good move, others were of the view that it was a waste of time and resources as the questions were pre-approved. We are now joined by Winston Mwale, our S24 contributor in Lilongwe, Malawi. Good evening, Winston. Welcome back.
Evening. How are you this evening?
Good, thank you. So President Chakwera was received with a lot of fanfare by the Malawian people when he won the June 28th elections. And now today, he took questions from members of parliament. So before we begin discussing today's address by the president, can you give us an update on the fate of General Namatanga, who was replaced last month by General Vincent Nundwe?
Well, thanks so much for having me. I think the issue of General Namatanga is getting a bit tricky because earlier on we did indicate that the president said his fate will only be known after the president meets what he calls the Presidential Council. This is the council that decides on security. I mean, the Security Council, not Presidential Council, rather. The Security Council. It's a council that looks at security matters in Malawi. So the president essentially said he's going to decide, or a decision on General Namatanga will be made after he meets this particular council. But up to now, we haven't heard anything, whether the president has made this council or not. So we're still in the dark.
I see. So now coming to today's address, are there any specific things that President Chakwera addressed that Malawians have been waiting to hear about?
Well, to begin with, I should say this has been a historic moment in the politics of Malawi because I guess since the democratic dispensation, there was only one time when the second president, that's Bakiri Muluzi, tried to appear before the House. But as you know, in Africa, when the opposition sees a sitting president, sitting president in the House, in Parliament, there's a lot of heckling and things like that, you know. So it was stopped. Okay, so we're talking of almost 30 years now since something similar happened. Now today, the president, that's Lazarus Chakwera, indeed accompanied by the vice president Saulos Chilima, did present himself in the August House to answer some questions. So in the main, he dwelt much in response to issues that various people have raised as far as his State of the Nation address was concerned. For example, much of the responses that he gave in the August House dwelt on the questions that the leader of opposition in Parliament in Malawi, Kondo Nkrumah, raised. For example, the issue of when exactly will the president forego some of the presidential powers, because during campaign, President Lazarus Chakwera did promise that he's going to shed off, so to say, some of the presidential powers. So the president said, yeah, it's true, he's going to forego some of the presidential powers. He talked, for example, the issue of the appointment of the executive director of the country's graft-busting body, the Anti-Corruption Bureau. He says he's going to leave this to Parliament to decide. He also talked about the fact that is looking into the role of being a chancellor of public university. So he says this is high time that maybe the academia should be appointing someone to be the chancellor. So he also talked about the issue of houses for members of parliament. This is another controversial issue that is coming up, because in his State of the Nation address, he mentioned that his government is planning to build houses for all the 193 members of parliament. So this issue has raised eyebrows, and the leader of opposition in parliament also raised questions on this. So essentially today, he was responding to those questions that were raised by the leader of opposition in parliament.
I see. So now, one of the main issues Malawians had with his predecessor was corruption. Did he address that at any point?
Not directly. But he did mention that probably if the president is no longer allowed to directly appoint the director of the Anti-Corruption Bureau, that way the Anti-Corruption Bureau probably will be independent. So that could be another way of ensuring that corruption is dealt with. So he didn't touch much, but I guess by saying that you leave the independence of the appointment of the director of the Anti-Corruption Bureau, he insinuated that his government is doing something as far as the fight against corruption is concerned.
I see. Well, thank you very much, Winston, for joining me.
Thanks so much. Good evening.
Take care. Moving on to our next story, the Electoral Commission of Zambia has rescheduled the mobile voter registration exercise, which was supposed to commence on the 19th of October 2020 to November 20th, 2020, to be conducted from the 28th of October to the 30th of November 2020. Chief Electoral Officer Patrick Nshindano says that this is to accommodate eligible citizens who have obtained their national registration cards. Furthermore, the Commission says it is not doing away with the existing voter registration, as is being claimed by some sections of society, but instead verifying details of already registered voters as part of a cleaning process. Mr. Nshindano says that the last voter registration was compromised, hence the need to conduct a verification process, as some foreign nationals were registered as voters. Precious Leah Tumba filed this report.
Electoral Commission of Zambia Electoral Chief Officer Patrick Nshindano this morning during a media briefing emphasized the need for all registered voters to present themselves for verification, update and capture of additional information required, including biometric capture. He has clarified that the essence of this exercise is not to scrap off the existing voter register.
We need to capture your other fingerprints. It's on imperative. So that individual needs to present themselves so that we capture the biometrics. In addition to that, there's been changes with regards to the delimitation exercise in terms of electoral boundaries. So the details on the old register may not necessarily conform to the new electoral boundaries that have been put in place. So one has to come forward and be able to present themselves and align to the new electoral boundaries. But there are also a number of other factors. There are people that move. If you voted in Kitwe in 2016, there's no guarantee that 5 years later you're still in Kitwe.
However, there has been quite a number of allegations that the Commission is owing media houses huge sums of money. When asked when the Commission will settle the arrears, Mr. Nshindano refuted the claims, stating that the Commission does not owe any media house money.
I must mention that the Commission at this point in time, unless it's current, we do not owe any media house. This is directly. And I'll distinguish that. It's important that you take note of that. All media houses that we've engaged with directly, both old and current, unless they're within the credit period, everybody has been cleared off.
For S24, I'm Precious Leah Tumba.
And now in sports news today, the sensational Zanaco Football Club have taken to heart the preparation of every aspect for the return of the 2020-2021 league season. Zanaco Club media officer Martha Nshimbi stated that the team has been acquiring players as part of the preparation process and will resume training next week. The club has not held back in acquisition, as the new players range from strikers to upgrading some young players from young Zanaco.
Make it to ABSA Cup, we couldn't, win the title, and we're also not participating in CAF competition. So the signings have been in preparations of the 2020-2021 season, because we want to meet our targets, which is, qualifying for CAF, winning the title, and also being part of the ABSA Cup, also winning the ABSA Cup title. For now, we're still off season, but we're resuming training on the 14th to start preparing for next season. As you know, 17th October is just around the corner, so we're starting preparations on 14th, which is next Monday. So the team starts training on Monday next week. So far, before the season ended, we acquired Baba Basile from Muza FC. He is a striker, and we also acquired Sambalungu, who joined us. So these are the players that were acquired while the season was still on. And now, they've, the club decided to promote two young players from Young Zanaco. As you know, the Young Zanaco is supposed to be a feeder to the senior team. So 2 players from Young Zanaco graduated that are part of the senior team, One of them is Mike Nosey, who is a midfielder, and one is George Zimbili, who is a striker. Then we also acquired the services of the ex-Zambia under-20 international player Albert Kangwanda.
That's all we had on this evening's bulletin. Here's a recap of your headlines. Malawian president rises up to task. PMRC optimistic about presidential address. Fire breaks out at Beirut port 1 month after explosion. Pharmaceutical Society president refutes suspension rumors. And in sports, Zanaco eyes set on lifting FAS League Cup. Thank you for watching. Remember, S24 is your first and only Zambian 24-hour news channel that continues to be at the source of your story. Good evening.
Live from Lusaka, Zambia, this is S24 News.